On this episode of the High Quality Fun podcast, we talked to Dylan, who has lived out of a van for 2 years now alongside his girlfriend and 2 dogs. The couple made the decision to buy a gutted van and build it out from scratch, including plumbing, heating, and power, which includes a custom battery setup and solar panels. We get into the decision to make this leap, the improvements they've made over the years, and how they make it work while working full-time. As somebody who has always wanted to build out a van, this was particularly fun for me. We got into some of the pros and cons of van life, and he even shared some tips and tricks for people to consider if they are adventurous enough to live this lifestyle. While I sat at home from my desk, Dylan recorded his half sitting in an RV park parked outside a Joshua tree, soaking up the desert atmosphere. I hope you enjoyed and envy this conversation with Dylan as much as I did.
I'm 26 years old, got a girlfriend that is 26 as well. I've been together for 6 years. We kind of fell in love with the outdoors together. During COVID, we were, going out a lot more to the springs. We were living in Florida at the time, so we were doing a lot of backpacking and camping around that area. And we decided that we wanted to eventually move to the West Coast, or at least further west, right, into more mountainous areas. So she found a group called the Idaho Conservation Corps, which is a youth group that basically takes, people that are interested in the outdoors and puts them out there and does fuel reduction for the forests, for fire prevention, basically. So she wanted to go do a stint with them for a couple months. This was right at the peak of COVID. It was 2020. September, we drove out with her Camry to Idaho. We stopped at Yellowstone along the way and, just saw some incredible country, beautiful views. And it ended up that some of the fires actually prevented the work from going. So we had to hightail it back to Florida. But after seeing all the beautiful West Coast, we were like, it's time to move. So I bought a Jeep Wrangler, converted it to put a little bed in the back. We drove that out to Colorado, started living there for a few years. It was great. We loved Colorado. Loved getting out, but you only have 2 days a week to really explore such a big state when you're working and living in the city. So for us, we were there for, I want to say 7 months before we decided to buy the van and eventually convert it and live in it full time. So it was really just a combination of, getting out there, seeing all these beautiful things, and then realizing it's going to take me a lot longer than I want to see all the things I want to. That's kind of where we are now. We've been living in the van full time for about 2 years now. Just hitting all the country we wanted to. Everything that's been on our bucket list, we've been trying to knock out.
So you moved to Colorado and pretty much traveled on weekends with a little bit of a, truck camping setup, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was.
And you just liked it. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say I ripped out the back seats and put like a piece of plywood down. We just threw a memory foam mat in the back and just roughed it.
Okay. And when you decided, what was going through your head when you said, I want to get a van or I want to get something to actually live out of? Because there's so many people that do rooftop tents, they do vans, they do campers, RVs. It sounds like you guys made the decision and then you really had to hone down on how you wanted to make it possible.
Yeah, well, because I had a Jeep Wrangler, it was the 4-door. There's a company, Ursa Minor, that makes, it's like a pop-up top for that completely replaces the stock top. We toyed around with getting that for a while, but because we have 2 dogs, it would have been really tight, to do full time. With the van, we got running water. It's not a high roof. We can't stand up in it, but it's still a lot more comfortable with 2 big animals and 2 people, to have a good place to sleep, good place for them to sleep, place for us to make food, and running water was a big thing for dishes mainly.
I know that before we had kids, we looked at so many different options, right? Tents, quick setups, rooftops, trailers, and we ended up settling on this quick setup tent that's 45 pounds. It barely sits in the bed of my truck. We did truck camping around the US with that, and then had 2 kids shortly after. And it was the same conversation. Do we get a pop-up? Do we get a van? Well, we can't really afford a van right now. Do we do the truck bed camper? So that was that was like a long decision making process for us, and we ended up getting the pop-up, and we really like it so far with the young family. um did you buy this van already converted, or did you do the project yourself?
So I bought this van as an empty two-wheel drive cargo van. I did the
Okay.
entire interior conversion myself, electrical, plumbing, and even the carpentry. Everything was done by me. The only thing that I had anyone do to the van is we actually had to convert it to four-wheel drive, and that was a very lengthy conversion. That took about 4 months. It was in the five figures for sure, multiple times over. Um, but I think it was highly worth it, to not have to worry about getting stuck in sand, snow, or mud in order to being able to go wherever I want, essentially. It was very worth it to us. There's places in Colorado that we got to that, there were even some Jeeps that were questioning if they were going to get there and had no issues. So I'm very thankful we put the money where we did. It would have been nice to have been able to stand, but I'd rather be able to stand outside in a more beautiful place than just stand out in a parking lot.
For the
But
people watching this video, he's actually sitting outside in front of the van right now. Oh, yep, there it is. What model and year is this vehicle?
so I have a Chevy Express. It's a 2007. It's the standard wheelbase, but it's got the Duramax diesel in it. So it's got a 6.6 liter turbo diesel. It's about 18 miles to the gallon and makes just under 400 horsepower. So it's pretty peppy. It's one thing I really wanted. It's a big, bulky van. I didn't want to get stuck in traffic. I wanted it to be easy to drive, right? Because a lot of these rigs, people don't realize that driving them for, 8 hours at a time, it's really uncomfortable after a while. If you have to keep your foot planted to the floor, like in the Pro Masters, they have a V6 and it's front wheel drive. So if you try taking that out, you're not going to have fun trying to take it up a mountain. You're not going to have fun, especially if your build is any weight to it at all. It's just going to make it even more uncomfortable to drive. So for us, I wanted an engine that was going to be easy. It was going to be good maintenance wise. I'll, I'll get into that later. I've had to do some things to this engine that I probably didn't need to. But yeah, it's been good to us. It's been very good.
It's funny you mentioned like comfortability of driving in the mountains, because we have the pop-up now. We have my truck, which tows that thing fine, but we also have my wife's Escape, and that thing's a V6. And I was looking at the towing capacity, and it actually can tow that camper no problem. So we're like, all right, cool. We're going out to Colorado. This is gonna save us a ton of gas. And we went out there for a wedding. But after the wedding was over, we decided to go up to Twin Lakes in the mountains and
It's
set up
beautiful. I love that area.
yeah, it was great. But when you're getting into the mountains, I was like kind of freaking out because the car would be fine, but then you'd get a warning that said, oh man, what did it say? It was like, turned off a cylinder or something like that. Like it had some messaging right there on the pop-up that was like, hey, we are underpowering your engine so that you do not overheat this thing. And I'm pedal to the floor, that message pops up, and it just keeps trucking along. People are going around me, no problem. So it worked out, but it was a little bit of a trial by fire with this car in the mountains.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was entertaining. Um, so where do we want to go with this? I actually want to know more about your build out. You had this thing
yeah.
completely gutted. You had to frame it out, and the engineer in me wants to know how you did heat, how you did water. I assume you have a satellite for internet. If you can just tell me a little bit about like the utilities of this van and how you built it out.
Yeah, so we actually went through a couple different build outs, right? When we first bought the van, obviously it was empty. I just threw like a couple 2x4s in there and made a bed frame mount for a fridge. And we took it up to Montana and then back down through Yellowstone and the Tetons. So that was the first build. It was really minimal, kind of just a shakedown to see what we thought we needed, right? Or how we wanted the layout to be. But from there, I framed it out with just inch thick plywood on the bottom. We used marine wool. It's like water resistant, corrosive resistant. It's supposed to be really good for mildew, which is a big thing if you're living in a vehicle. Condensation's a huge part, especially in the Pacific Northwest, where we hung out for quite a bit last year. So we factored that into mind. With wood, especially, all of it was treated with mold resistant coatings, so that way, it wouldn't mold, it wouldn't rot, because that's a big part of this as well. I have a 24-gallon water tank in there, so if there's any leaks, I want to make sure that my bed's not going to rot and mold underneath me. So that was like prime concern number one, was water penetration, stuff like that. Thankfully, we got the van super low miles, so I didn't have to do too much maintenance on the roof. We didn't have any leaks off the bat there. Um, but yeah, it was kind of it's pretty minimal in there because it is a shorter van. It's the shortest wheelbase you can get on the Chevy Express. It's about the same size as a standard truck with a 6-foot bed. It's just covered. So we went aside and have a 12-volt fridge freezer in there. That's our biggest power draw. And our first electrical system had a 200 amp hour lithium battery that was 12-volt. And it worked great until we ran into the winter, and we're only getting like 5 hours of sun, if that. And we actually had our battery system die on us 4 or 5 times in the first couple months. And that prompted us to move to Florida for a little bit with my parents and redo the electrical system. So I bought a couple of raw lithium cells from China, 3.2-volt packs, and I made a 280 amp hour 24-volt battery. So it was roughly 3 times the size of the one I had before. And we've been using that now for a little bit over a year with no issues. So very glad I did that. In the beginning, it was fine for the weekends, but when we moved into it full time, we were just using the fridge too much. It was just taking too much power, and had to revamp it. But it's been good so far. We have 550 watts of solar. I got a 24-volt charger that charges off the alternator at 15 amps. So we're pretty good. I got shore power now as well. We didn't have that in the beginning, which was kind of a underestimation on my side. I thought the solar was going to be, sufficient all year round, and even with a battery size 3 times the size, there were times when we were in the PNW and it was raining for, a week, 2 weeks straight, and we just had to go to an RV park every couple days and charge up. But other than that, it's been working really, really well. I'm very proud of it so far. I put it all together myself, and it's lasted, I think, we're at like 100 cycles now, so it's pretty good. Uh,
So
so yeah,
you have your car battery and you have the van battery, and then the battery system that you made actually
yeah,
charges off the alternator. But
yeah.
aside from
So
that, they're pretty much independent of each other.
yeah. So it only charge off the alternator when the vehicle's on. It takes like 4 or 5 hours of driving for it to generate enough amperage for it to like get to 25-30%. So it's more of like a supplemental charging system.
Mhm.
But yeah, we use induction a lot if we're, moving back and forth. Because there's a lot of times where we'll be just trying to get through a section of the country, and we'll be driving 400, 500 miles a day, pretty regularly. So we'll just pull over, cook with induction, and not really have to worry because we're going to fill that back up on the road anyway.
That was gonna be my next question. Do you actually have so you have a electric oven, but you probably also have a gas oven that you can use, or just a
Yeah.
portable one so that you're not eating up all your electricity?
Yeah, so it's just a single burner induction cooktop. But we also do have a dual burner propane stove that we use most of the time. It's a lot more energy efficient, right? Propane, we have a 10-gallon tank or 10-pound tank. It takes like $3 to fill it up. So it's really easy, no brainer, especially if you're out there for, a week or two with no supplemental power, just what we're getting off of solar. Makes it a lot easier to stay out there longer without having to worry about going back into town to charge our battery system up.
And then what are you doing for water? I know you mentioned that you had a tank. Do you actually have a pump for that? And then do you have your own, is it gray or black water tank, or do you just go outside or use a porta potty of
So
some sort.
I'm glad you mentioned this because a lot of DIY van lifers, they have, a DIY setup where it's a sink that drains directly into like a 7-gallon tank. And that's what we have. So it's an internal gray tank. I just pull it out from underneath the sink and dump it. Um, but I've had that overflow a couple times on me without realizing it. And I've opened up my sink cabinet underneath, and there's just been like a gallon of water just sitting there because I didn't realize I needed to dump the tank before I did dishes. So that's something that I've been thinking about upgrading to. We've been in the van for 2 years now, and obviously, there's a lot of things that I wish I did differently. That probably is the biggest one, right? Because now if I want to dump my dishes, even if I'm at an RV park right now and they have a sewer hookup that I can't use because I have an internal tank right now. So that's something I've been thinking about upgrading as well, just throwing a black tank underneath and plumbing it there so it's a little bit easier to take care of, and a little less gross to deal with these as well.
That doesn't cover your bathroom though. Are you still going outside for it, or do you have like a
No, yeah,
combustible
we
toilet?
don't. No, we don't have any toilet. We have got P cups. That
There you
works.
go.
But yeah, number two is outside, usually in a hole. That's that's
I
the that's the part of van life not a lot of people want to talk about. But yeah, I've pooped in holes pretty consistently across the country.
when we did our trip, it never really phased me. I felt really bad for Chelsea because she had to go and like squat against the tire or something or find a tree.
Hmm.
Um, but that probably saves so much space when you're doing a build out like that, just not
Yeah,
having to
it
worry about
does.
that. And yeah, I would love to do a van or a bus or something, and that might be something we put on the pros and cons list to figure out if it's worth it or not.
Yeah, if you got the space, it's definitely worth it, in my opinion. I mean, especially if you're going to be boondocking a lot, right? Just sleeping on public streets. We do that pretty consistently. And, it's not the greatest for Christina where she's got to, like, finagle her bits into a cup to, you know, make it happen. Um, but, there's lots of pros and cons. We've got a small van, so there's a lot of sacrifices we have to make to get that space to make it work as well. We got some storage on the roof, but could always be more. It's a
Right,
fine
right.
line between carrying your whole life with you and just what you need.
You mentioned boondocking and camping in public. We when we towed the pop up out, we made a couple stops along the way, and we legit just stayed at like truck stops. So you'd go to a
Yeah,
Pilot or a Flying J, and you know that everyone's sleeping out in their trucks, or like you see a van there, a camper, and you assume they're sleeping. But we had a pop up, so we would just park this thing in the like car lot, set up the whole thing, and people are just looking at us like, wow, good job.
yeah,
Um, but that was I didn't even know you could really do that because then you're kind of like broadcasting that you're staying there instead of just being incognito. But that still cracks me up. It was brutal because we'd show up at 2 a.m. or something and then pop this thing up. It's the last thing I wanted to do. I just wanted to pass out, and then you have to tear it down again. But it worked out real great.
yeah. That
Um,
was one of the things that we thought about when we were getting in the van. Is just how much work it's going to be to get it set up when you get to where you want to sleep versus how much work it's going to be to drive off in the morning when you want to go get a cup of coffee. And the van's pretty much the easiest thing. Like we thought about a truck camper, but then you're gonna have to pop out from the truck camper and walk back around into the cab of the truck. And if it's raining or it's snowy or you're just in a public space, you try to be stealthy. It's not really the best look. And it's worked out really well for us. We got some stuff that lives on the bed, unfortunately, that has to migrate to the front of the cab and vice versa when we want to leave. But aside from that, it's very easy to just pick up, step out of bed, and drive the van to where I want to go.
Probably minimal, and you guys are so quick with it. You have your jobs
Yeah,
and
right.
responsibilities that you do.
Yeah, it's like
Um,
3 bags of clothes we just toss back and forth. So
oh, that's
not
not
too
bad.
bad.
So where are you at right now? And then we can kind of dive into some of the places that you've gone with this thing.
Yeah, so right now I am outside of Joshua Tree National Park in the California desert. Last weekend we went to Slab City and Salvation Mountain. I'm not sure if you're aware of those places, but Slab City is basically uh, like the last free place in America, they like to say. It's a really large community of vagabonds, as I would call them. Just people that travel and don't really conform to normal society. So it was a really interesting time going over there and seeing all the art that they were making with refuse, and just the different vibes. I've never personally been to the desert before this, and I'm really enjoying my time out here. It's a really unique place. Everyone that I've met has been super friendly and super kind. So I've been really enjoying it.
How would you how would you define vagabond versus like a digital nomad or a uh expat?
Vagabonds are people that don't really have jobs, right? They're just kind of like freeloading travelers.
Okay.
So I'm not really sure what I would fall into because it's like kind of doing digital nomad thing. I do have a full-time job, but some days I feel like I'm just bumming it, man. You know, it's a fine line between homelessness and houselessness.
So yeah, I said this in the beginning. Dylan is probably one of the hardest working people at our company, and right now he's in California, Joshua Tree. Like he could get a phone call up tomorrow that he has to hop on an airplane and fly out to the middle of nowhere. And I don't know. I'm assuming with the van that becomes pretty easy because you don't have to pack up much. You can just drive over there, or if you're in a local area, you can just get an Uber or a taxi or something.
Yeah. The worst part about it is having to leave my girlfriend with the dogs for sure, because that does put some stress on her. She's in school as well, full time online, so she does have some responsibilities aside from taking care of the dogs. And when I'm out, it's a lot harder for her to deal with that. And there's certain things in the van that you can't do with just one person. Like we have an awning that goes out on the van, but we need two people to set it up. So if I leave and it's raining, she's really stuck in the van the whole time. So
Dang.
that's something that does kind of suck. But again, to live this life, there's a lot of sacrifices we have to make.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we can go into that right now. We can talk about the good and the bad of it, and then go into some of your good and funny stories. So I have a
Yeah.
you're right, I'm in a house we built. We have all the space in the world, more or less, and running water right from the well. We don't have to worry about electricity unless the power goes out. I don't know. What are some of the things that you love and hate about the van life?
Well, right now, I'd say the thing I hate the most is probably not being able to stand because it's been getting a little bit long in the tooth, right? Got some neck pain, got some back pain pretty consistently, but I'd say that's pretty much the biggest thing. I mean, it's super nice to be this free and just really kind of go wherever we want, you know. There's a lot of parts about me leaving that aren't great for Christina, so I think she might have a little bit different views on it than I would. Um, but by and large, it's you kind of get acclimated to it pretty quickly, and I feel like don't really miss so many of the necessities that you thought you would, right? Like we do have running water, and that's good. I can wash my hands. I might not be able to take a shower whenever I want, but I can be stinky for a day or two.
I should ask about that. Do you have a pump and an external shower, or do you just rely
Yeah, so
on
so we do have a pump for our water. I mean, we have a sink. That's about it.
right?
For showers, we just stick to campgrounds mostly. Um, Pretty much every RV uh, resort or RV park has pretty nice hot showers that you can go into and just pay for if you don't want to stay. So there's been a lot of times where I've just gone in, put $2, $3 into a coin op shower and been on my way after that.
I dig it. I dig it. All right. Well, we'll get into some stories now. Where are some of the coolest places that you've gone, and tell us about some of the bullshit you've had to deal with living out of a van.
All right, what do you want first? The good or the bad?
Let's go. Let's go some good stories.
Okay, all right, we'll go some good stories. So, I think the best place that I've ever been is probably Banff. Uh, oh, mind shock. I was about to say Banff, California. That's not it. It's Banff, Canada. It's in Alberta. It's right on the border of Alberta and BC. Um, this year, Christine and I, we took a week off and we drove up from Montana into Alberta. We drove, well, actually, I think we drove into BC and then through BC back out to Alberta to go to Banff. We went backpacking to Twin Lakes, not the same Twin Lakes in Colorado. Ironically, we were just talking about that. But I, man, that was one of the most breathtaking places I've ever been. Just all these glaciers surrounding you, and it's just pristine alpine wilderness. Like coming from Colorado, I was even like awestruck because it's it's a lot more remote than I was expecting, but at the same time was so accessible. We did a 5 mile backpacking trip into the Twin Lakes, and oh my God, it was one of the most beautiful trips I've ever done. I mean, we were just sitting there at the base of these giant glacial mountains in a river of snowmelt. And as you're sitting there, you just hear cracks of the glacier cracking, and you see an avalanche come down the side of the mountain into the lake you're sitting at. And it was just so insane. It's one of the best backcountry trips I've ever done.
That's awesome. We went to Alaska and got to do like a fjords tour, which is essentially just riding. What's a fjord? It's a lake carved out by a glacier, and so we're riding through these glaciers or through the fjord, and they took us to an actual glacier. And it was the same thing. We're really far away, but yeah, suddenly you'll hear that crack, and you'll just see a whole face fall off, and that is a eerie noise, but a very cool
It
thing to
is,
see.
yeah. The first time I heard it, I was not thinking that's what it was. I thought it was like a bear outside my tent or something. So I was a little bit thankful that it wasn't. But yeah, man, Alaska, that's someplace we wanted to go and just I didn't realize how far Alaska is to drive there. Like when we were in Canada, I was thinking about it and I was like, oh, we'd have to take an extra 2.5 weeks just to get out there and back. So that I think that's one that maybe we'll put the van on a ferry from Seattle or something, go see that way. But
Did you just do that to avoid the time driving or the
the time and
mileage
the
or what?
miles, right? Yeah,
Okay.
because I feel like getting out there, it's like 6,000 miles, and it's beautiful if you got the time for it. But I think I'd rather spend the time in Alaska than just, I hear it's a beautiful road to get to Alaska, the Alaskan Highway, but it's desolate, and with me working full time, it's hard to take enough time to do that correctly off and still manage everything else we want to do.
Yeah, after this call, we should talk about it a little bit because my in-laws drove from Michigan to Alaska. We flew there and hopped around. There's a lot to see, and there's a lot we did not get to see. I'd recommend it, especially with your lifestyle and having that ability. And another cool thing is all of the roadside stops you can camp at, and I've never really seen that or knew that. I know in like Michigan, you can park at the truck stops, and I just kind of assumed that was how it was throughout the entire U.S. But up in Alaska, you can just pull off on the side of the road, camp wherever you want, and most of the time, no one's even there.
That's how it is in a vast majority of the West, right?
Is
Like
it
as
okay?
soon as you get outside of the major cities and it starts to be more rural, more foresty areas, BLM and U.S. Forest Service owns most of the public land out here, and by and large, you can camp for free for 14 days, mostly anywhere that you can park your vehicle. So that's 90% of what we do is just BLM, National Forest land camping.
Do you find that you're saving just an ungodly amount of money, or does that money get eaten up when you actually have to go and stay at these RV camps? Because I know they're not expensive, but they're definitely not cheap, especially out west.
So I have definitely been spending more money than I thought I would, um, particularly on diesel, right? I'm in California right now, and I spent $130 to fill my van up from not even a half tank.
Oh my
So
gosh.
the diesel price is crazy, right? Again, am I glad we went with diesel? Definitely. I think it's better reliability wise and just power wise, ease to drive. There's a lot of pros to it, but that's something you definitely got to eat. It's just the cost of diesel. I would say, most of our money is just spent on that diesel and vehicle maintenance. Vehicle maintenance is a big part. Um, a lot of people, I feel like, underestimate how much money you're going to spend on your van and how long it's going to be in the shop for pretty regularly. Ours is a little bit more needy than most people's van. We tend to take it off road pretty hard. And as such, we have to do maintenance for that. So we had to replace so many bushings. I've had to replace probably 3, 4 wheel bearings in the front, and that's because we run extremely oversized tires, so that just eats wheel bearings. But the biggest thing is just the time that it's going to be in the shop for. Like for the engine work, sometimes you got to take the whole chassis off the frame, and that adds 2 to 3 days. I mean, you're talking extra thousands of dollars. Thankfully, we've only had to do that one time, and that was the worst scenario. We were in Florida, just finished the electrical system, just finished all the upgrades. My girlfriend and I, we took the van to, I think it was Juniper Springs for our anniversary. It was in March. Um, had a great time. Came back, the van was making some sounds. I thought it was just a serpentine belt. I took it in, had them look at it. They replaced the serpentine belt. I went back to go pick it up, and on the drive back, the turbo exploded. So
Oh
I
no.
had to limp back in regen mode, which was not great for the engine. Um, and what had happened is when we were out on some forest roads, must have went too hard through a sand dune and wedged about 5 pounds of sand in the intake manifold, and the turbo just sucked it all up, spit the bearings out, and yeah, it wasn't pretty. It was about $5,500 and it's like 3 weeks of repair time. So we were sitting there, ready to go for 3 weeks, just waiting for the van to be finished. And that was probably the roughest time. Thankfully we were at my parents' house. I wasn't stuck paying for a hotel or anything, but it still really sucked to be, so close and then have to wait for almost a whole month to be able to hit the road again.
Have you been stranded because of vehicle maintenance? I mean, that was fortunate you were with your parents, like you just said, but
Not due to vehicle maintenance. On the first time that we took the van out, we did get it stuck in some mud in Montana due to some heavy rains. But thankfully, I was able to just carefully back out of that situation. Yeah, we've been really lucky. I mean, obviously, I try to take as good care of the van as I can to make sure that it doesn't leave us stranded. Um, Actually, one time we were in Missouri and over the cold snap, my starter battery died. But thankfully, I was at a hotel that day and was able to just get a jump. Turned out one of the cells in the battery was bad. It was under warranty, so they were able to replace it for free. But that's pretty much the only time I think we've gotten like 100% stranded. And we weren't even stranded at that point. The vehicle just didn't want to move.
let's take a quick break and hear from our sponsors. Here on the High Quality Fun podcast, we love showcasing people's stories through our interviews and posts. This gives our guests the opportunity to share their favorite memories, but sometimes audio alone is not enough. Most people are sitting on a collection of hundreds of photos and videos capturing their favorite moments without the time or experience needed to compile these memories into a video. This is why I have chosen to partner with Spivo. Simply send them your unsorted photos and videos, and in 7 days or less, they will create a professional video edit that allows you to relive your favorite memories again and again. To ensure every customer is satisfied with their video edit, Spivo provides unlimited revisions for 30 days and offers a 100% money-back satisfaction guarantee. As someone who has limited time to edit his family adventures, let alone this podcast, I am excited to work with Spivo to help everyone eternalize their favorite moments. Visit spivo.com/discount/highqualityfun to learn more and let us know what you think about the product. We'd love to share it. Now, back to the show. Are you just hiking out of this, or do you snowboard or bike or anything?
We do backpacking out of it, but that's kind of it. Just do a lot of hiking, get to
Okay.
some
And then
remote places, you know.
do you go and visit a lot of people, uh, or do you like have a community of people that you've met through this, or do you kind of just
You know,
stick to
that's
yourself?
funny because I my girlfriend has met a few people and we've kept in touch on Instagram, but I personally don't have any social medias. And I feel like that's kind of been holding me back on some community. But really, it's not something that I've missed. I've been, just having the time of my life with Christina. We'll meet some people every now and then. We were in Olympic, we met some guys from Canada, and pulled over, had a beer with them on the pullout right before we left the next day. But it's a lot of just, meeting people, talking to them for a week or so, get to know them, and then see you later.
So
I
long,
haven't
best of
really
luck.
met any people out here that I've met up with reoccurringly. Uh, I have a couple friends that I've tried to meet, when I'm in their state, and definitely some family that I've met as well for the first time, just rolling through states that they live in. So it's been interesting. I had a couple cousins in Red Lodge, Montana, which is right outside Yellowstone. Um, I went there because I had ordered some folding kayaks uh, that got shipped to Denver and then got held in Denver for too long. So we hit the road, had them sent to them. Uh, yeah, I really like those kayaks, the Tuk Tuk. They're like cheaper than the Oru kayaks, and honestly, they work better in my opinion. I've had rides in the Orus and in the Tuk Tuks. And the Tuk Tuks is nice. I can fit my dog in there. I got a 70-pound pit bull, so me and him will get in that kayak and just tear it up.
It's a pretty sizable dog for a kayak too.
Yeah, people try to tell me he wouldn't be able to fit, but I made it happen.
It helps that you're a little guy.
Yeah, it does definitely. I feel like that helps overarchingly, like in all of van life.
Have you ever thought about putting you're talking about your back? Have you ever thought about putting not a rooftop tent, but just one of the expanders so you can stand up
So we
better in them?
are you talking about like a pop top?
Yeah, yep.
Yeah, like the Westphalias. We looked into that, and it's like $15,000. Like you can do it yourself, but personally, I don't really have the time to do something like that. It's a big project. I don't know if I trust myself enough to cut off the roof of my van either. Rather leave that to a professional.
Yeah, that it doesn't shock me at all that they're that much money. That's wild.
Yeah. Well, you think about it, it's like they got electrical systems that raise and lower the top, and then you got insulation and windows and all that. It's a good idea. I like that the functionality, but I think if we're gonna be able to stand in the van, I want to be able to stand in it full time. Not just whenever we're parked for the night or parked for a long period of time. I feel like that's something another thing you gotta set up,
Yeah, that
tear
makes
down.
sense. I yeah, I one day would love to do the van. It would probably be an extension of the house, or it would be a project where we buy something and build it out however we want it. There's a website called Far Out Ride, and they go into the like ridiculous engineering details of how they did all their plumbing, their electrical schematics, and everything. And it's just totally fascinating to flip through that and see what they did. Um,
Yeah, I read a lot of their articles when I was building my van.
okay, so you've actually heard of them. Awesome.
Yeah, big time. Yeah, I think I used some of their diagrams for my water pumps.
Very cool. Yeah, I would love. I want to do it, and a big part of it would be you can now go visit people, and you brought your hotel with you. Like, hey, we just want to plug into
Yeah,
your wall. We got our own stuff. Don't worry about us. Um,
yeah. I think you asked about how much I'm spending at RV parks. It varies a lot, depending on how nice they are, the location. But by and large, I think the most I've ever spent was like $70 a night. Which if you're thinking about a hotel room for two people and two dogs, it could well over be like three times that. I mean, I've paid $200 a night for a hotel in a major city before. So you are definitely saving a lot of money, opposed to just living out of a hotel. I think it's more economical for digital nomads such as ourselves to just see the
I
country
was
that way.
I was shocked when I went out to Denver or just Colorado in general, and we were looking at some of the RV parks there. There's so much more money than they are in the Midwest, and it makes sense,
Yep,
right? They're much more popular. So, like you said, if it's a $200 hotel room instead of 100, 120 here in Michigan, you're going to get the same rate change same rate change in the RV park.
definitely, yeah. And one thing I will say is a lot of times state parks have the same benefits, same hookups, and they're usually like half the price. Oregon and Washington state parks, you can even get discounts. I think Washington's is the Discover Pass. I'm not sure which one Oregon was, but we were able to stay for free at a lot of state parks just with that pass, which paid for itself in like probably the first week we got it.
Yeah, maybe we can go into some tips and tricks that you've learned doing this full time. And yeah,
Number one tip, never underestimate how many paper towels you're going to need. I've definitely been stuck cleaning up dog puke with whatever I had on hand because we forgot to grab an extra roll of paper towels before we went out in the wilderness. Um, the other one is the America the Beautiful Pass. Uh, we got that after our first national park trip with the van after we moved into it. And I did not realize how much money that was going to save me. It was an $80 pass that we paid for, and that gave me admission to every single national park in the country, as well as reduced fees for camping in federal areas. So there were a lot of campsites that we got 50, 75% off just because we were pass holders. And I'd say that pass probably paid for itself 20, 30 times over already. Every time you go to a national park, it's $30 entrance. We didn't have to pay that. We hit probably a dozen, 2 dozen national parks last year.
that's awesome. I think we
Yeah,
did like 7 in our road trip, and that was just
yeah.
like
There's
in
like,
and out of every single one.
yeah, a lot of them are like that. National parks, they don't let dogs walk in them too much. Usually, it's like one or two trails. Yosemite was really cool. When we went to Yosemite, we were actually able to walk all the way through the valley and up into Mirror Lake with the dogs. So we really enjoyed Yosemite. Um, but it's kind of disappointing going to a lot of national parks like Glacier. Can't walk the dogs there. Yellowstone, can't walk the dogs there. So we tend to just stick to the national forest areas around those national parks because they're usually pretty more relaxed about the dog restrictions.
It's funny you mentioned that because we had a puppy when we did our big truck camping trip, and uh, I like removed the rear seats. I built a stage, put her kennel in the back so that she wasn't chewing on everything. She was still a puppy. Um, and we went to all these national parks where you're not allowed to walk dogs around. We went to Death Valley, and every time we'd stop, we'd be like, all right, here's a mile, a half mile hike. We want to go see that thing over there. Let's leave the truck running, lock the doors, blast the AC. And that truck was just screaming, trying to keep that thing cold
Yeah,
while we went and did
yeah,
our
no
short
kidding.
stint. Yeah, but it held up. We didn't have any issues. And now because of our dog getting so used to that truck, she almost prefers to sleep in the truck when we go camping nowadays because she doesn't like hearing all the nature. She's a
Yeah,
little skittish, which is funny.
yeah,
Um,
mine are the same way.
really. Well, good.
Yeah,
That
they'll
gives
hear
me
a
some
noise.
reassurance.
Yeah, I feel like maybe it's because we live in the van for so long. They hear a noise outside, they got to be protective. So sometimes I'm thankful for it. So other times I'm like, shut up. We're trying to be stealthy. And here you are howling at the top of your lungs at 2 a.m. So
Oh man, is there anything else you want to get into, Dylan? Otherwise, I think we've covered quite a bit.
closing statements. Starlink sucks. Get an LTE internet connection. That is, I think, my last tip. Last thing I gotta say. I have had nothing but bad experiences with Starlink, professionally and personally. Every time I've needed it, it has failed me. So I'm no longer a Starlink subscriber.
Good to know. Good to know. I know a lot of
Yeah,
people boast about that.
might get some hate for it, but I don't know. It makes sense if you're in the desert, but if you are in the forest, covered by trees at any point, you know, it ain't gonna work.
I love it. Well, thanks so much for coming on, Dylan. I hope you had a good time.
Yep. Thanks for having me. I enjoyed it.
Thank you for listening to the High Quality Fun podcast. If you guys enjoyed this show, please give us a follow. And if you have a good story or just want to say hi, feel free to reach out to us on Instagram or YouTube. Thanks for listening.